there. Okay.
Oh, time to mute.
Okay, yes, I'm going to mute everyone.
Now,
Okay, mute all. Okay. All right, that was a good warm-up. That definitely warmed us all up. So now we're ready to roll. So there's a well-known, as we prepare for Shavuos, we continue our discussions about the great, awesome holiday of Shavuos, where we reconnect to the enormous gift that Hashem has given us, the gift of the Torah. There's a well-known midrash which the Rebbe quoted quite often, and that is that when the Jewish people came to get the Torah, Hashem asked, "Who are going to be your guarantors?" So just like when you give a loan to someone, you want a guarantor, or just like the bank is requiring that we have 4 guarantors on the loan that we're taking for the mikvah. So the Hashem said, who are your guarantors? So the Jewish people said, well, our elders will be the guarantors, because the elders are the ones who will make sure that we all behave and we do what we need to, and we learn the Torah, etc. We stay committed to the Torah. So Hashem said, no. The elders are not. Don't satisfy me as guarantors. So they said the adults will be the guarantors. So Hashem again dismissed the adults, and finally he said the children will be the guarantors. And Hashem said, oh, those are good guarantors. Why did Hashem see that the children are good guarantors? Children, we don't trust children for anything. You can't, if you give a child something to take down the street. Well, one of the general principles in Jewish law is that there are 3 categories. One of them is a minor under bar bas mitzvah. Pigiyason ra, encounter with them is always bad. Why? And you'll understand what I mean when I say encounter. I mean an engagement of significance. Because if you damage them, you're obligated. But if they damage you, they're not obligated. Because we consider children not to have enough intelligence to be able to be held accountable. So God says the children are going to be the guarantors that they're going to keep the Torah. How can you rely on children? Oh, since when do we suddenly rely on children? So the Rebbe explained in 1952 in a talk on Shavuos. He explained that there is something unique, a unique advantage that children have. And the unique advantage that children have is that when it's called, the Talmud refers to it as girsa di yankasa, which means the learning of childhood. When a child learns something, what happens? It sticks. I know we forgot what that looks like, but when a child learns something, it sticks. They learn something and it stays with them. So, and as we all know, there are things we remember from our childhood, but yesterday we forgot exactly what we did, what we said, what was going on, etc. Because when we absorb things in childhood, we're like a sponge, and we take it in and we connect with it. Until today, the Torah readings that I learned when I was 13, I was already an adult technically, but when I learned I was 13, 14 years old, right after my bar mitzvah, the tune I remember, but things that I learned when I was already 20, 25, I don't have the same grasp on it, the same memory of it, and I have to review it more often before I read from the Torah those passages from the Torah. And there's an interesting Mishna, which every year when we learn it, where we read it from Pirkei Avos, from Ethics of Our Fathers, so we always get comments because as they say, sometimes the truth hurts. So the Mishnah says, Elisha ben Avuya said, Haloimed yeled lamahu doime, when someone learns or teaches a child, what is it compared to? Like ink that's written on a new piece of paper. And someone who teaches an older person. A zakin really is an elderly person, someone who's 70 and older. What is he compared to? Like ink being put on erased paper. So don't take it personal, but that's what the Mishnah says. And what's really fascinating is that the person who says this teaching is a man by the name of Elisha ben Avuya. Elisha ben Avuya is an infamous individual in the Talmud. Why? Because Elisha ben Avuya was an enormous scholar, but he also defected, and he became a heretic. Things happened, whatever it is. We never know what triggers someone. That's why the ethics of our fathers teaches us as well. Don't trust yourself until your day of death, because you never know what is going to trigger you. And we probably all know from our own experiences that there are moments in our lives where we have big doubts, or things come up, or circumstances that shake us, and suddenly we don't even recognize ourselves. So that's what happened with Elisha ben Avuya. So now the Mishnah could have quoted the teaching without saying his name. Didn't have to say his name. If you're going to quote the teaching and you value the teaching from him, fine. But why mention a guy who became a heretic? So the Rebbe explains something really beautiful, and which I'm going to just share in brief, that Elisha ben Avuya is the perfect example of this teaching, because he learned, the Talmud tells us about his childhood and how his father committed at his bris, at his circumcision, to devote him entirely to Torah. And that's what his father did. And that's why he became such a tremendous scholar. So he was actually speaking of his own life, that yes, he defected later in his life, but he still had tremendous scholarship. And in fact, one of his students, I believe, before he defected, Rabbi Meir, who was also a brilliant scholar of repute, also continued to have Torah conversations with him even after he became a heretic, and continued to learn from him. So how did he learn from him? Because he still had everything he learned stayed with him, because he started studying at childhood, and he learned so much as a child that he was commenting this teaching of the Mishnah. So his life was a perfect example of the fact that despite the fact that he was a heretic, he still had all of these teachings. And that's the reason why Hashem said, who is going to be our guarantors? Our children. Because I know this, Hashem said, if you're going to say our parents, the people who are already retired, they have time, and so they have time, they can sit and study Torah all day. That's very nice, but that's not going to guarantee transmission from one generation to another. They're going to come to their children who are adults and say, you should also study Torah. They're going to say, we're busy. We're making a living. When we become retired like you, then we'll study Torah. That's no guarantee of transmission. Then we don't know what's going to happen. When they said, the adults said, we're going to guarantee, God says you're going to guarantee. I don't even know if you're going to study Torah. You're going to get so caught up in your business and in pursuing money and getting caught up in all of the responsibilities of life. How do I know you'll study Torah? But when they said our children, Hashem said, oh, this is going to work. Because when what we teach a child stays embedded within a child. That's a very, very powerful. And that's the reason why I try and influence parents to realize that the most crucial time of education for children is when they are youngest. The younger they are, the more crucial it is. 2 years old, crucial time. 3 years old, crucial time. As we get older, we become a little bit smarter, which is a problem. I'm not saying it's entirely a problem, but it's partially a problem, meaning that there's a side to becoming smarter that goes against us, that works against us, because when we become smarter, we become cynical. We have experience. We start questioning. How do you know? How can I understand this, etc. And that can work against us. I'm not saying intelligence is very powerful and we have to use it. But there is a side to it, an element of it, a small part of it, that the more we become developed, the harder it is for us to take things in, to accept things. Faith in a child is beautiful. Children have faith, and when you speak to children about ideas that require faith to connect to it, they have no problem. If you tell children stories, I always share there was a big issue that happened once in a school not too far from here, but about the Talmud, a teacher who taught the students that the Talmud says that Vashti, the wife of Achashverosh from the story of Purim, she grew a tail. And there was a whole big uproar about the fact that the teacher is teaching the kids such craziness. The Talmud says it. It's not craziness, right? It's just that the teachers who didn't learn it, or some of the teachers who didn't learn it when they were kids, they have a very, very hard time accepting such a thing, because to them that belongs in a what's it called book, in a Disney book or whatever. But I learned it as a kid. I accepted it. I don't have any problem with that story, because when you tell a kid things which require faith, they are not part of our experience. Kids can accept it. They don't have resistance to only accepting whatever they experience, which is one of the great limitations of what happens when we get older. So that's the benefit when we teach children Torah at a very young age, and it's in them. They can't get rid of it. You cannot get rid of that. It's embedded within them. And I once had I had a friend in the community. He no longer lives here. He's moved on already to a number of other congregations. He was a Reform rabbi not too far from here, and we developed a nice friendship, and we studied together from time to time. And he once wanted to take a new Superman movie came out, and he was taking his kid, and he wanted to know if my son would like to, if I'd like to bring my son also. And I told him no, thank you. So he asked me why. So I told him, I don't bring my son to watch movies. I try and fill his mind with other things. So he started to try and convince me that, you have to open your son up to different, to expose him to different things if you want him to be integrated into society. Now, a lot of you know my son, who's 21 years old, right? I don't think he's short. He's limited. He's not integrated into society. He can hold a solid conversation with people twice his age and 3 times his age, which he does very often. The point was that I tried to be somewhat guarded in what on the focusing what I'm giving my children, because it's crucial time. If I let them spend time absorbing things which are what I would say is really, I don't think develops them. It may touch their creative side a little bit, but that's it. It's not really serving them, where I can serve them with something which is really powerful and enriching, and give them values and faith that sometimes, like I see, they can share with people 3 times their age, and actually infuse people 3 times their age with what they have, because they were given, they absorbed it when they were children. So that's the reason why Hashem said our children are going to be the guarantors. That's good. You teach your children Torah. Torah is not leaving the Jewish people. Can't leave the Jewish people if you teach the children. So I want to conclude with a very, very powerful story, a very inspiring story to me. There's a rabbi in California who's actually we would call him the head shliach, the first shliach to California, the state of California. And today there are, I don't know how many shluchim in California, Chabad emissaries, Chabad rabbis, but probably in the hundreds, maybe. And he's a very strong personality, which is why he was able to go against odds in the 1970s. Imagine what California looked like in the 1970s. You post a Woodstock, hippie movement. And you have a Chabad rabbi. In one sense, he fit right in, his whole garb and everything. And Nachum Meshuggah, we say, another crazy guy's on the street. But it was a battle. Anyway, when he was there was at that time there was a Jewish, they would call it's called like a Jewish university. Today it's called the American Jewish University. They changed their name from the Brandeis Bardin Institute to the American Jewish University in the Simi Valley, where they call it the Valley in California. And they had a program for very gifted students, where they would get like 75 of the most gifted Jewish students from around the country, and they would give them like a infusion of Judaism over a short period of time. And they would have different rabbis that would come and speak to them. So the Rebbe told Rabbi Kunin, I want you to get into that program as a teacher, that the kids should be exposed to a Hasidic rabbi. So he pushed hard to be accepted, because he was really an outcast. And finally they agreed to let him speak, but they always put him as the last speaker on the, at the end of the day when all the kids were exhausted and they heard 100 speeches already, they put him up to speak, and he would speak. One year, this is how I heard the story, that one year the dean of this university called Rabbi Kunin. He said, I want you to speak first. And why do you want to speak first? He said, we have a very challenging group. I think the way they pronounce it is Sioux City, Iowa. Is that correct? One second, I lost everyone here. Is that how you pronounce it? Sioux City? Anyone?
Sioux City.
Sioux City. Oh, Sioux City. Sioux City, correct. Sorry. Sioux City, Iowa. So they had a group from there, and they were a little bit less involved in Judaism, and for some reason they asked Rabbi Kunin to get up and speak first. So Rabbi Kunin got up and spoke to them, and it was a very nice conversation, except that there was one guy there. His name was Stephen Leibowitz. Sound Jewish? Stephen Leibowitz. So Stephen Leibowitz, every 2 minutes, he had an issue. He was like an angry kid. He was fighting with Rabbi Kunin, like he wouldn't stop. You know, everything. He had a problem with everything. How do you know? And who says? And propaganda, whatever he was saying. I don't know what he was saying, but he was giving Rabbi Kunin a very hard time. But Rabbi Kunin doesn't get intimidated easily at all. I don't know if he was ever intimidated in his life. He's a very strong personality. And but that was the experience of what happened. Now every year at dinner, Rabbi Kunin would go into the dining room and he would teach the kids a Hasidic song. Teach them a Hasidic song. Because sometimes with a niggin, a song, you can touch people in a way that all of your speeches, it won't accomplish. So he went and then he said, I want to teach you a song. It's actually a very beautiful song. I'm not going to sing it to you. I'll be honest with you. I'm not singing it to you because if I sing it to you, I'm going to get very emotional. It's a very emotional song to me. So the song is, and I think I may have once shared it in shul, but the song is Kol Bayar Anochi Shemea Av Lebanim Kareya. A voice in the forest I hear, a father to his children is calling. And then it switches to Yiddish. A Geschreya Gewalt una Gefilder, a Vater involved sucht seine Kinder. That a Geschrei, a yell, a cry in the forest. A father is searching for his children in the forest. And obviously the song is really a metaphor of God seeking his children, the Jewish people, and he's asking his children to come back to him. And it continues on more words to it. Where have you gone? And to please come back. It's a very moving song, but a bunch of teenagers, I'm not sure what moves a bunch of teenagers necessarily, but he sang this song. He explained it and then he started to sing it. So he started singing the song, and the second he starts singing the song, this kid, Stephen Leibowitz, starts bawling, starts crying. Like no one knows what's going on, but this kid is weeping. He's weeping so much that after a minute he picks himself up and he runs out of the dining room. Okay, Rabbi Kunin continues. He sings the whole song and everything and done. Okay, he's curious, like what happened to this kid? He's so hostile, and then he ran out. So he walks outside, and he sees the kid sitting there crying and crying. And when he sees Rabbi Kunin, he stands up and gives him a big hug. Wow. So Rabbi Kunin is like, "Is everything okay? Are you okay?" Yeah. He says, "Let me tell you why I'm crying." He tells him an unbelievable thing. He says that his grandfather was a Hasidic Jew, and clearly his grandfather was a Chabad Chassid, because this is a Chabad song. And he said that my grandfather was when he got old, he couldn't live alone, so he lived with us. And my parents when they came to America, they weren't religious, and my parents would go to work, so I was raised with around my grandfather as a little kid. When he was a little kid, he was around his grandfather a lot. And he said, I remember that one night, my grandfather was very old already. And one night I was a little boy, and my grandfather calls me, and I come over to him, and he sits me on his lap. And he says, I wanted to teach you a song. And he says, one day it'll come to use. That's what his grandfather tells him. And what song does his grandfather teach him? This song. So his grandfather sings it and sings it and sings it a few times until he got it into his kid got into his head. The kid, that was in the morning, one morning. The kid goes to school. He comes home. His grandfather passed away that day. Okay. They didn't take children to funerals in those days. I'm not sure what people do today, but then they didn't take. So that he never saw his grandfather again. But one thing stuck in his mind. The song his grandfather taught him. The thing though was, he didn't speak Hebrew. He didn't speak Yiddish. And so the song, he couldn't retain the song. So what did he do? I don't know if he went to Hebrew school, whatever it was, wherever he encountered a rabbi or someone who he thought might know the song, he tried to get the song back through that person. But the truth is, most people don't know the song. It's a Hasidic song. So you need to go to a Hasidic rabbi, in particular a Chabad rabbi. I'm not sure how many people outside of Chabad know this song. But in Chabad, it's a well-known song. It's one of our classics. So he could never find someone to get that song back. But he was a kid, and his grandfather gave him something, and it didn't leave him. He couldn't grab it in his head, but it was in him. It was in him. He said, the second, Rabbi Kuhn, he said, Rabbi, the second you started to sing, that's the song my grandfather sang to me. That's the song. And he was so moved that all of his resistance drifted away. All of his resistance dropped just like that. Why? Because his grandfather taught him a song as a little kid. And when someone brought him back to that place, all of his questions were irrelevant. He was now connected once again with his grandfather. This Stephen Leibowitz became a Hasidic Jew. Became a Hasidic Jew. Why? Because our children are our guarantors. So I want to just conclude by saying that if you have, it's 7 o'clock, we're supposed to start our next class, that if you have any children in your, that you have influence over, whether they are your children, whether they're your grandchildren, whether they're your brother's grandchildren or your sisters or your friends, you should know that even if you can't influence them to send them to a Jewish school or to in some way get some Yiddishkeit, if you're together with them at any opportunity, give them something Jewish. Intrigue them. Tell them a story from the Torah, something that catches their imagination, because if you do, you will give them a gift that will stay with them for the rest of their life. This is the secret of Jewish continuity. We have, okay, no problem. Very good. Thank you everyone for joining. And I'm sorry, I wasn't supposed to run overtime tonight because we have another class now at 7 o'clock. So it's a class on the do-it-yourself Shavuos. So I'm not going to exit now because I don't want anyone to have to lose anything. But I just need 1 minute to get open some things up here on the computer that I'm going to share with you. Okay, so you don't need to stay for this class, but if you'd like to, I would love that would be wonderful. And actually, just give me 2 minutes. I need 2 minutes, and then we'll get started.